I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
At the end of the 70s, my band broke up. What am I going to do? Nobody likes my songs. I got nothing going for me. So instead of playing guitar and telling jokes, I started telling jokes and playing guitar. I never learned jokes to be a comic. I learned jokes because they were a lot of fun and made me popular. I was always the last guy at a party, the last guy telling jokes, the last man standing. You got a joke, he's got a joke, I got 5. You got a joke, he got a joke, I got 6. And I would always listen to people because I might get a new joke out of it.
What do you like about jokes? And by a joke, you're like, it's like classic joke telling. Here's the premise, here's the punchline, boom.
I tell jokes because I love to make people laugh. Because comedy and humor comes from tension. And poop and sex sets up more tension than anything else. And I like to tell a joke that was like punch you in the stomach and make you scream. I'm not a comedian, I'm a joke teller.
But Jackie, what you did was you basically, no one was going to choose you and say, this is the next great comedian. But what you did was you chose yourself. So I have Jackie, the joke man Martling, on the podcast. Jackie was Howard Stern's, I don't know what you call it, sidekick, cohort, writing partner for 18 years. You were with him from the beginning on, almost the very beginning, all the way up to 2000.
From his New York beginning, 1983, and then 1986 to 2001, I was like a cast member. You know, I wasn't really a sidekick. I kind of. Robin was the main sidekick, but I was part of the cast, and I was the head writer.
And then in 2001, you left, and Artie Lang basically took the role that you were playing.
But that's kind of a... People got the wrong impression of that because people... It's so funny because I've done Artie's podcast a bunch of times, and he actually did the foreword to the book I'm here promoting.
Sure.
And it's great because I did the audio book, but he recorded the foreword. So he did the audio of the foreword, which is so fun. But people say, oh, it's great to see you guys getting along again. He came on the Stern Show many months after I left. There was never any crossover, any animosity. Him and I have been friends forever.
And I don't feel like he replaced you. I feel like he replaced maybe that, third person that was needed there to balance off the dialogue between Howard and Robin. They needed a comic voice in there.
But it was a totally different role.
Totally different voice. You're not him at all.
Right.
Different style of comedy, everything. There's a couple interesting things you just said there that I want to dive into. I'm just going to bring up your book here. I read your book. I learned so many things about you. I do, of course, want to talk about Howard Stern. Even the title of the book is The Joke Man Bow to Stern, which I guess is I just realized now this is what an idiot I am. I just realized now saying that you're making some kind of boating reference.
Right. Well, I live on the water and I've always been from Bayville and talked about, I don't own boats and never did. I'm not a fisherman or a clammer, but I've been a swimmer forever, my entire life. And I've, the last 20 years of living on the water, and it's just fantastic,
But I had no idea that was a boating reference. I just thought you meant like you were kind of servile to start.
Right. It's so funny because and that's tongue in cheek because I never really was.
Yeah.
But people say, "Oh, I just got it," about a stern, I just got,
Does that mean it's a bad title or a good title? I mean, makes them think about it.
I think it's good. I think, it's a gift that keeps on giving. I don't know.
And you have to mention Stern in the title, I feel, even though I feel your career, and this is what I really wanted to say, I feel your career is more rich than just your time with Howard Stern. It shouldn't be just defined by those 18 years.
Well, it was a huge hunk and put me on the map. But I've done, even though it was maybe not wonderfully exciting or that successful, I've done a lot of stuff and had some crazy times and a lot of fun. So, and I definitely want to pull in the Stern people, of course.
You have to.
I wrote so much because I just assembled stories and, I hit a lot of dead ends trying to do this book, and the deals fell through a couple times. I wound up with so many stories. Like the book is like 30 or 40% me, and then it goes to the show, but it's me on the show and the stories of the show. I had that same exact book in my computer, only different, like 30% of me and 70% of the show, but completely different stories about my childhood and about college and about the Stern Show. It was like Sophie's Choice trying to write this book. Can I fit this in? I can't fit this in.
Well, there's always the expression about writing, though, that you have to kill your darlings. And that's the challenge of rewriting.
It is a killer, right?
And look, I thought the book was a good size. You hit many stories. You hit many arcs. I was really fascinated by, because I didn't know this about you at all, I was really fascinated by your time with Rodney Dangerfield. And I kind of wanted to talk about that. Just by brief background, though, you're a very funny guy. You were a stand-up comedian. You spent some time with Rodney Dangerfield. You sold some jokes to him. You traveled with him. You did a lot of stand-up. You had your own stand-up shows going. Howard Stern thought you were very funny, and then we'll talk about your whole your 18 years with Howard Stern. You were kind of the funny guy on the Howard Stern show. But I want to talk about just stand-up and Rodney Dangerfield first. Like, what got you into stand-up?
My whole life has been an odd, I always say it's like a pinball machine where the ball hits and jumps around because I learned how to play guitar in high school because I told a friend of mine who's still one of my best friends, my very best friend that I've known since I was 5 years old, and now I'm just about to be 70.
You're about to be 70?
Yeah, and I told him I wanted to, it's funny. I tell everybody I'm 70 because if you tell them you're 69, you got to go through the whole explanation. I'm not making a dick joke. I really am, So I
think I have a feeling you have to do that. Like when I'm 69, I probably won't have to do
right.
that.
So at any rate, I'm 69, and so I said to my buddy, teach me how to play guitar, and he said, "Great, we got to teach you 4 chords. We could have a band." So in 9th grade, he taught me how to play guitar. We had a band, and we're not making much money, but we had gigs and we're playing before the Beatles hit, for a couple of years. I mean, we're playing Dion and the Belmonts and Little Anthony and the Imperials. I go way, way, way back. And then I played in college. And whenever I was in a band, I used to tell jokes, which did not fit. It doesn't fit for a guy in a band to tell jokes. But when I get people in front of me, it's a disease. And my whole life, since I was a kid, all the jokes have stuck in my head.
Right, like the whole thing with you is any joke. You do the stump the joke man. If somebody calls up, gives a premise, and you would say the punchline.
The thing is, I don't know all the jokes, and I get stumped all the time, but I know a lot of them. I can figure most of them out, and I probably know more jokes than anybody in the world, which is an odd calling. But I always assumed that every guy that grew up in America knew the jokes that I knew. I didn't realize I was sitting on a treasure trove. And one night, it's in my book how I told a joke at Catch a Rising Star, and the MC came up later and said, "Hey, that was a great joke." And I'm like, "Well, you knew that joke." He said, "No, I never heard." I'm like, how could the Catch a Rising Star MC not know that joke? And all of a sudden, I realized I'm sitting on a treasure trove.
I mean, let me ask you a question, because I feel like a lot has changed in comedy and that the whole notion of a joke is different. So now a comedian gets up on stage and they usually tell some aspect of their own lives and they punch it up.
It has always been like that. What I did was not a form of comedy. I had no intention of ever being a comedian. I was playing guitar to meet girls. And then all I wanted to do, I was at Michigan State in East Lansing, Michigan for 7 years. And all I wanted to do was have enough talent to be able to come home and make a living in some form of music or show business so I could live in New York and do what I love, because there was no way I could do a straight job. I would have put a bullet in my head. So we played in this 2-man group that became a 3-man group that we played original songs and told dirty jokes. That's what we did.
How much did you practice music every day during that time?
No, I played the songs when we got on stage. I was not as invested as I should have been. I spent a lot of time writing songs, but I never, when you first learn guitar, you're voracious and learn every chord. And then all of a sudden the Beatles hit and there's more chords to learn. But then I stopped learning. I just wrote some songs and I had all these jokes. I had never had any intention ever of being a comic. And falling in with Rodney Dangerfield was so happenstance. That's the greatest story in the book. That, you know, it's because it
really is great.
My friend told me a lie. That's how I wound up meeting Rodney, because he told me a lie. And I sent stuff to Rodney blindly, just like I sent stuff to Howard Stern blindly. Just like I sent stuff to Gershon Legman in the mid-'70s, who's like the all-time joke collector. But the average person has no idea who that is. But all these people responded to me.
Well, I think that's a very important lesson. You went to the top of the top, Rodney Dangerfield. You sent blindly.
Because you have nothing to lose.
Right.
So I took all the jokes I knew and typed them out to fit Rodney. I put them in the envelope, wrote the address, and mailed it because I had nothing to lose. And 2 days later, the phone rang, and it was Rodney. It wasn't like I sent him a bunch of stuff a bunch of times. Like I sent him stuff, and bang, the phone rang. I said, "Who is this?" He says, "Rodney." I said, "Rodney who?" He said, "Oh, I knew you were funny. I knew." But he was my hero, and I loved him, but not because I was a comic or had any aspirations of being a comic. I never listened to Bill Cosby and Robert Klein and all those. I listened to Red Fox to learn more dirty jokes, and I loved Henny.
But like Rodney Dangerfield, I still love listening to him. Like he does the Carson, the 7-minute set, the 7-minute setting next to Carson. He just has that like persona, and then bang, 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 bang.
It's so flawless and so wonderful, and it's so boom, 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 boom.
Like break it down. Why is he so good?
Because there's no fluff. There's no extra meat. It's just like it's punch in the jaw, punch in the jaw, punch in the jaw. There's no filler. It goes on. And if once in a while a joke misses a little bit, he's, "Oh, what happened? Where'd everybody go?" And it was so amazing. So that when he called me, and I wound up, I only traveled with him for a couple of weeks, but I'm still remembering things that happened because he was so him. There was no character. That was the guy. It was like when I first went to pick him up to go away, I said, "You realize I'm going to laugh every time you open your mouth." He says, "We'll have a party, And so here I was with all these jokes. And at the end of the 70s, my band broke up. What am I going to do? All I got is jokes. Nobody likes my songs. I got nothing going for me. So instead of playing guitar and telling jokes, I started telling jokes and playing guitar. And I just tried telling these. I never learned jokes to be a comic. I learned jokes because they got me laid and because they were a lot of fun and made me popular. I was always the last guy at a party, the last guy telling jokes, the last man standing. You got a joke, he's got a joke, I got 5. You got a joke, he got a joke, I got 6. And I would always listen to people till all time of the night because I might get a new joke out of it.
Well, I want to break one of these things down. Like, what did you like about, what were your favorite jokes? What do you like about jokes? And by a joke, you're like, it's like classic joke telling. It's like, here's a premise, here's the punchline, boom.
People say, why do you have to tell dirty jokes? And it's so simple. I don't tell jokes to be cool. I tell jokes because I love to make people laugh. I want to make you laugh as loud and as hard as I can. And a dirty joke will just make you laugh hard. It's not that I care about saying penis or vagina or anything. I know that a dirty joke, because comedy and humor comes from tension. And poop and sex sets up more tension than anything else. You listen to an old Carson monologue, and he'll go on for 7 or 8 minutes about the world, about the country, about the state of music. And at the end of his monologue, he'll make an obscure penis reference and the roof would come down because that's where the tension is. And I like to tell a joke that was like punch you in the stomach and make you scream.
So like, I hate to ask because I don't want you to perform on demand, but like, tell me like one of your favorite jokes from back then.
So, well, this isn't from back then. You know, it's so funny because
You still do a joke a day on your joke line.
I never stop with the jokes, but it's so funny because I know all the jokes. And I had a show called Jackie's Joke Hunt on Sirius 101, which was one of Howard's channels for 8 years. And we told every joke in the world, 8 years of an hour of jokes every week. And it was just, I mean, it was tons and tons of repeats, but we told thousands. I mean, I broke out all my stuff and it was amazing. And one guy came on the show and I send out jokes every month as part of a newsletter. Anybody's listening to this, if you email me, jokeland@aol.com, if you email me your name and your email goes on and you get jokes once a month. It also says where I'm working, buy my book, but there's jokes and there's also kids' jokes to tell your grandkids. I'm a nut about this stuff, right? So this guy, Ed Hamill, amazing talent, comes in to do the show and he goes, oh, let me tell you that best joke in your newsletter this week, this month, and he tells me the joke. And I go, that wasn't in my emailing. Where'd you get that? It's hysterical. He said it was in your mailing. I said, listen, Ed, if I'm smart enough to know every joke in the world, I think I'm smart enough to know the ones that I don't know. I know that I don't know that. So it became one of my very favorite jokes. And I always said I was going to tell jokes to Paul McCartney. And this is in my book.
Oh, yeah. That was really funny, but go ahead.
And that's the joke. So you heard that joke.
Yeah. Say it anyways. It's very funny.
So my girlfriend said, wow, we're at a screening for The Big Short. And it's a real glitter eye, you know. So what the hell are we doing there? And Paul McCartney.
What the hell were you doing there?
We got invited. I'm on Peggy Siegel's list to get invited to screen. It was The Big Short at MoMA, and it was great fun. And my friend Tom Bernard's the president of Sony Pictures Classics, and so I get different ways of getting into these things. And so Paul McCartney and Nancy Chevelle come walking down the stairs. My girlfriend says, it's Paul McCartney. You can finally get to tell him a joke, because everybody knows I always wanted to tell him jokes, because he's a joke teller. And,
I didn't know that about Paul McCartney.
Oh, and I know. I fought with Howard about this all the time. I said, you give me McCartney for 5 minutes, he's mine. We'll be friends forever. Not because he'll especially like me, but he'll know that I'm a source of his next good dick joke. And if you Google McCartney and goat, you'll get Paul McCartney sitting against a green screen telling a very, very filthy goat joke.
All right, I'm going to do that.
You know, McCartney and goat. Trust me. So he comes walking down and says, she says, go tell him a joke. I said, listen, the reason McCartney can live in New York, the reason he lives here is because people don't go up to him. They don't go up to Woody Allen and bother him on the street. That's why they can exist in New York. I said, there's not a person at this party that doesn't think they have a completely valid reason for going up to Paul McCartney and telling him where they were in 1964. Everybody thinks they wants to talk to a Beatle. And I said, the fact they don't do it is why he can come here. So me and my big mouth, he comes walking around the perimeter of the room, and his wife walks in front of me, and Paul walks, I'm telling you, an inch in front of me. And the devil got me, and I just stopped him with my hand. I said, can I tell you a joke? And he said, sure. I said, so a guy goes for a job interview, and the interviewer says, what do you think is your biggest fault? And the guy says, I think my biggest fault is my honesty. And the interviewer says, I don't think honesty is a fault. And the guy says, I don't give a fuck what you think.
That's good.
And he roared. He roared. As he walked away, I said to my girlfriend, I am sure that he's playing that over in his head, and he's going to tell that joke 10 times in the next 2 days, because it's a great, great joke, you know. And I have so many jokes that I'll be on stage telling a joke, and I'll say to myself, this was on my first album in 1979.
So what do you mean you'd be on stage? So clearly then you're moving into, when you say on stage, I think stand-up. So how do you kind of translate the jokes into a stand-up act?
I was, as my band was about to break up, I was playing guitar and singing my songs in a club, like not even a club, a bar where my band used to play. We were a 2-piece band and then a 3-piece band. And the band broke. We weren't making any money. I'm 31 years old, you know, and the band breaks up.
Were you depressed?
No more than ever. Half the day I'm elated, and the other half I'm depressed. But I've been the same maniac forever. People say, "Oh, you're off the Stern Show." Is it bother you? I'm like, listen. When I was poor in the '70s, I was happy half the time and miserable half the time. When I was a multimillionaire working for Howard, I was happy half the time and miserable. It doesn't alter me.
Yeah.
That's just, you learn that you got to ride the roller coaster, because that's going to, I don't know about you, that's how, whether I'm smoking pot or drinking, whatever it is, it's still up and down and up and down.
Yeah.
And not even for any valid reason. So I'm playing, and everything that happens to me is because people are such pieces of dirt. My band used to play at a place called My Father's Place, which was a famous show club on Long Island. And it was a big deal when we got to play there, because we were this little local band, a couple guitars and a keyboard. Excuse me. And we got to play. So the owner, Epi, Michael Epstein, who's still around, he'll probably hear this podcast, he was so cheap that my band was playing at My Father's Place, and it was a big deal. And we went for sound check, and he had booked the Gong Show auditions for ABC TV to make a few extra bucks before our show. So we're going to do the sound check. So these people are getting up and doing, whatever they were doing, hitting their head with a spoon. And two different guys got up to do comedy. And I said to myself, I'm as funny as these guys. And I went up to one of the guys and said, "Hey, how'd you get to be a comedian?" And he said, "It's easy. I had cards printed up." And he hands me a card. I still have it. I'll send you it's Betty Boop Productions, Richie Minervini, comic. So I said, "Stay around and watch my band." So he watched my band. He thought I was great because we're telling jokes and being idiots. And he said, "You should come to Richard M. Dixon's White House Inn," which was a little variety showcase on Long Island. I went over there, and Eddie Murphy was there, and Bob Nelson, Rob Bartlett, people that have come to prominence. And Richie, who's still one of my best friends to this day, opens for Kevin James, and he's the one who owned the East Side Comedy Club. All this stuff is in the book. One thing follows another. But there was no place on Long Island to do comedy. And I said, "Why don't you guys come over to," I had a gig. I got an audience and a microphone and a guitar. So the guys, Murphy and Nelson and Bart, they would come over and get up and do 5 minutes at my gig, because there was no place else to do it.
So you basically created the environment where you could then put yourself on the stage and tell jokes.
I already had that environment. I played in a bar with a band, and then I told the owner I want to have my own night. So I was playing in the same bars that he owned. I played every little joint. It was horrible. The band was horrible. Then once the band broke up, there's nobody to commiserate with. So you're in tears on the way home. But I stuck with it. And then me and Richie Minervini, the guy who had the cards printed up, we started a show at a restaurant in Huntington and charged people to get in. And we paid the comedians, and the comedians came out from New York because they would actually get paid. And that show at Cinnamon in Huntington grew into the East Side Comedy Club, which grew into the Long Island comedy scene. Before that happened, I recorded my first comedy album in that restaurant. I'm not a comedian. I'm a joke teller.
But Jackie, what you did was you basically, no one was going to choose you and say, this is the next great comedian. But what you did was you chose yourself. You basically said, okay, I'm going to make my own album and distribute it. And you started selling it.
What I did, I made a judgment call. I knew these guys were, the Seinfelds and the Risers are doing 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, clean material. They're headed for Carson. I told dirty jokes. I had no intention of telling clean jokes. I didn't want to. There was a million comedians. There was nobody telling. I did try to do comedy for a while, but I just love telling jokes. I love making people laugh.
What's the difference between a joke and comedy?
Well, it's not as defined a thing. That's not fair to say that, because so many of the guys are so great and so funny. But I just like doing my brand of it. And I realized instead of being in the city and going from the comic strip to the Improv to Catch a Rising Star, I'm going to do it on my own on Long Island and, do it in little places and hire people. And I had shows everywhere on Long Island. And then we had the Cinnamon. And then my dirty dial joke. I started a dirty dial joke just to get people to go to our gigs at the restaurant. I mean, there's so much information here. I know I'm overloading.
No, it's okay.
But my 516-922 wine that's been going for 38 years and is still going, that got me the gig at Governor's Comedy Shop, and I became the main guy there. And so by 1982, I had made 3 of these homemade comedy albums. I was doing stuff, instead of being in the city and going from place to place, I'm out on Long Island and doing it on my own. I was the first guy that was ever standing at the door selling an album as people left.
Right, like this is before, like Eddie Murphy had a huge album release, but it was like years later.
No. But when he did it, he had a real album and a real, this wasn't a Robert Klein or a Bill Cosby, Why Is There Air? Those were huge records done by huge record companies, and Cheech and Chong. This was a little homegrown album. By the time you're Bill Cosby with a CBS record, he didn't have to stand at the door and sell his albums. I'm literally at the door selling my albums. And the comics are making fun of me until one day somebody goes, you know what? We made $50 a piece tonight, and Martling made an extra 80 because he sold his records. Maybe he's not stupid. So by 1982, I got 3 records, cassettes and everything. And I'm sending them everywhere. You should hear the stories from people that I sent records to 30 years ago. They still revel in the stories. And one of the sets I sent was to Howard Stern.
Right, and so again, you were sending to a lot of people with Howard Stern. It stuck.
It wasn't a dart aimed specifically to get on the radio. It was there's another person to send it to. I was in Washington, D.C., and the club owner said, this guy got fired. You should send your stuff to him. So I just sent my stuff to him when I got home with no idea that anything would, just like sending the stuff to Rodney. I wasn't sitting there expecting the phone to ring. I almost pooped my pellets when hello.
So just on Rodney, just for a quick second. So I think a lot of people don't realize that Rodney was paying a lot of people to write his jokes. He had the style and he knew how to like deliver. He had the delivery ability. He knew how to work the crowd. He knew how to own the stage. He had this whole persona, but he didn't write most of his jokes.
No, but he wrote plenty of them. But so many people gave him jokes. Sold him jokes. He paid $50 a joke. It was a known thing. Like this guy sold him this one. This guy sold him that one. It was so funny because I got made fun of on the Stern Show, but it was common knowledge in the comedy business. It's like, it's commerce. Just like Howard Stern, he wasn't lacking in what he was doing before I got there. It just helped him. Like if Rodney's got a great act and you sell him one more great joke, it just makes him a little better. You know what I mean? It all adds up.
Right? Because you sold him jokes that fit his persona, fit his style. The I've got no respect sort of thing.
Right, and it's such a defined character that And I have a loosely full of jokes that I sent to him that he never used. And if you read through them, you'd laugh your ass off. But he knew specifically what would absolutely, I'll tell you, I don't think this is in the book. When we got to Las Vegas, he was going through his mail because people would send him jokes,
Yeah.
And I said, boss, let me read them. He goes, what? I said, maybe you missed something, or maybe I'll see some daylight where you don't see it. Let me do this with it. Oh, okay. So he's reading, stuff and tossing it and saying, oh, what about this one? So he hands me a piece of paper. And I said, what are you doing? This is spectacular. What are you talking about? I said, this joke is unbelievable. This is the quintessential fat, ugly woman joke. You think so? I said, yeah. And that night, he's in Las Vegas. He's headlining Las Vegas. I'm in the back of the room. And he did the joke. And I'm telling you could hear a pin drop. And I think he went to his death thinking that I was teeing him up to fail. And meanwhile, I thought it was the fun, but it was just a little too much for a crowd to grasp. And it was total silence. And because the joke was, this girl was fat and ugly. She had a hairdresser for each armpit.
That's funny. How could you not get that right away?
He always said, the audience is in Vegas. Everybody thinks Vegas is hip. They're square, They're from Kansas. They're square. They don't get nothing, I'm telling you, it just it lay there. He glared from the stage, and it was so funny.
So 2 things. One is that is in the book, just to prove to you that I read the book. That story is in the book.
I wasn't sure if I put it in there.
Second off, what do you think? Why do you think he initially passed? Like, how his sense of humor for what would make people laugh was so highly tuned, and that's a funny joke. What do you think?
Maybe on initial reading, maybe he realized it's a little too much for the person to swallow because it's a double problem.
It's a little absurdist.
Not to kiss your ass, but a little quicker than the average person. You're a brilliant guy, so and I'm sitting there telling you, here's a funny joke,
And there's an absurdist
I
quality
wouldn't
to
put
it.
it in there if it didn't really bomb. I'm not bragging.
Right. But there's an absurdist quality to it, which maybe he didn't like that absurdism too much.
Right. It was, for whatever reason, it missed.
That's so funny. So then you hit Howard Stern. Howard Stern calls you up, and then for 3 years it seemed you were going on the Howard Stern show for free, right?
It was so organic. I went on there and sat with, the first day I walked in, there was
1983.
1983. I had sent him my records in August of 82, but he got this, NBC and got settled and blah, blah, blah. And then he called up, and my girlfriend, who was going to be my wife eventually, called up and said that disc jockey Howard Stern calls. He wants you to call him. I called him and said, hey, we listen to your records. You know every joke. You want to come in and sit in today? So I went to the city, and it was Howard and Robin and Fred. And the very last day I was there in March 2001, it was Howard and Robin and Fred and me. And we had a hell of a time. And, at the time, I didn't know from radio or from sitting around, except sitting around shooting the breeze with people. And we must have just clicked. It was so much fun. They laughed when I talked, and I laughed when they talked, and I'm a good laugher, and I'm a good audience. And at the end of the day, he said, hey, you're a lot of fun. You want to come back next week? I was like, hell yeah. And plus, he was announcing my Dirty Dial joke. So that was exploding.
Because what's the economics of that, or what was it back then?
It's still the same. I've never made it's cost me a fortune for 38 years. But it's done crazy. It's done more for me than I'll ever know. And if not, it's... You know what? I'm a diseased person when it comes to jokes, and I just love it. And it was funny because after the second week there, he called me up, and because he said, "Yeah, I want you to come in each week." And he called me up and said, "I got some bad news." And I'm like, "Oh, well, it was fun while it lasted, easy come, easy go." And he says, "I can't promote that 922 wine anymore." I said, "Why?" He says it's filthy, and NBC's getting complaints, so I can't promote that on the air. Do you still want to come in? I said, the hell with 922, of course, And then slowly but surely, I would, when we did Mrs. Flemstein, which was our version of Stump the Comedians, I'd give Fred some 2-line jokes, and I'd give him some rank outs to rank out with the listeners. And
what's a rank out?
Your mother is so fat, or, your sister's so ugly, or whatever. And over the course of the 3 years, I don't really know. I was just like passing him an idea or a line, but we really weren't situated, so I could do that easily. And then we moved into a different section of the studio, and I was like next to him, so it was easier. And I remember at some point I just grabbed an actual stack of paper and got a Sharpie and said, I'm going to do this right, and was kind of handing him stuff. And when he got fired and got rehired at K-Rock, when I went in there my one day a week, there was like a little table, like a stone's throw, an arm's length from him, where I could actually write and pass him a note, which was, I don't know if it had been there already or it was by design or whatever. And I went in there just one day a week, same thing. And by this time, I was actually giving him jokes. I swear I wish I could remember exactly the path. But all of a sudden, he called up when I was on the road in Virginia Beach and said, hey, we're going to mornings. Starting next week, I want you to come on 2 days a week and do your thing with the notes.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I just want to say thank you to everyone listening to this. I hope you enjoy what I've been doing. I don't ask for a lot, but please take a moment to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you get your podcasts. It will only take you a second, but it will help other people discover the podcast. And my goal is to share this great content with as many people as possible. To see the show notes, just head on over to jamesaltucher.com/podcast. While you are there, you can join my free insiders list to get notified when I post a new podcast. Once again, thanks so much for joining me on the journey of this podcast. What's an example of like when you would pass him a note? Like some situation would be happening in the studio and you would think of something funny for him to do.
It's this simple. Mm-hmm. You're there and Robin is here, and you're having a conversation, and I'm here too. So the three of us are in the room having a great old time. It's a fun morning, and you're talking about something. You say something, she says something, you say something, and I have something funny to add. I'm a funny guy. Instead of saying it, I write it down and put it in front of him. Maybe a word, maybe a sentence, maybe a line.
Can you give an example? You don't really give examples in the book that much.
It's nobody has ever asked me. It's so funny. I have an attic full of every line I ever gave him. What would be? I can't even think of it. I could tell you something he didn't say.
Okay.
Because when we started working together, very early on, he said, "Don't edit. Let me edit. Whatever you come up with."
I want to write that down. Why did he say that?
Because he wanted whatever was fresh coming out of our brains, and he would use it or not use it because we're sitting there, and I'm sure this is in the book, we're writing a parody to I Got You, Babe, for Cher's bagel maker boyfriend, and his name was Rob something. And so we're going to do I Got Cher, Babe, from this Brooklyn Bagel Boy's point of view. And we got to the middle of the section of this song. I just smiled and shook my head, and he goes, "What?" I said, No. He says, "What?" And I'm brand new to this is we're on mornings. And I said, "It's too stupid." He said, "Nothing is too stupid. Tell me what you were thinking." And the middle section of the song where it goes, "I got flowers in the spring and you to wear my ring. And when I'm sad, you're a clown. And when I laugh, you're always round." And the line I gave was this bagel maker saying, "I see London, I see France, I saw Cher in her underpants," which is just the most childhood and we roared, and it was the funniest line in the song. And that was the lesson nothing is too stupid. Because if you listen to that show, there could be something so hip and so smart and so cutting, and the next thing could be a second grade joke, that was the beauty of the show.
That was the contrast.
You never knew. And
because he was obviously incredibly smart. He is incredibly smart.
He is so brilliant. Nobody could do what I did if he wasn't there. It wasn't like I could just do that he had to be as bright as he was, that I could put something in front of him that he could work it into what he's talking about, or he could switch it around and make it about Fred, or switch it around and make it about me. Or sometimes he'd go past it, and then if he liked the line enough, he would actually, because we're working, we're in real time. So all of a sudden, by the time I write it down, we're past, he would circle around and come back so he could hit it. It was phenomenal. And that's the story about Bruce Jenner and Dom DeLuise in the book.
That was brilliant, because that also sort of explains in a weird backhanded way, and you don't address this, but it sort of explains why Bruce Jenner's show, when he's Caitlyn Jenner, got canceled. Because you sort of see the seeds of that right there in your story about Bruce Jenner.
Right, it was
and
so
Dom
funny
DeLuise.
when all of a sudden he has his sex change. He's back in the news. I said, that makes my story more relevant now.
The fact that he got canceled. The man has a sex change. He's a Kardashian and still can't get the show on
If you
air.
can't make that interesting,
right? But you see the evidence of that in your story.
Right there, right in the story. He just
So Howard Stern, you get on the show and you kind of see there's a couple things that are very interesting. One is the fact that you sent out all over the place. A lot of people don't do that because they have a scarcity complex, like, oh, I can't share this everywhere or whatever.
See, the difference with me is these jokes have been around forever. I'm not about writing these and these are mine. I'm about I gathered these, I'm sharing them. I got a joke book coming out right behind this book, and Penn Jillette wrote the foreword, and he said, Jackie, is not a comedian. He's a joke teller, and he's amassed these jokes, and he makes them the way they should be and told the way they should be. And he just said, thank you for all those people that like jokes,
So then you send out, you create an opportunity for yourself, and then you're not, I think this is a very important lesson. You're not transactional. You're not saying for 3 years, you didn't say to Howard, oh, I'm only coming back next Tuesday if you promote this or if you give me money. You kind of saw that there was an opportunity there. You didn't know what it was, but you knew that this is good for you.
I knew it was 50,000 watts. At some point when we went to K-Rock, my wife said, he really should at least be paying your parking. So she asked him to pay the parking. Now, that was actually going to be a scene in the movie, but never made it to the movie because he was supposed to give me $25 a week. And that's, of course, he'd only have a 20 on him or have no money on him or I'd forget. So it was like a running joke. But I knew right away, after the first couple of weeks, he said, why don't you bring other comedians in to hang out on the air with us and maybe stump the comedians or for whatever reason. I asked so many comics, do you want to come on the Howard Stern show with me on a Tuesday? And they'd say, what's it pay?
Right.
And I'd say, what do you mean, what's it pay? There's no radio show having comedians. This is a 50,000 watt flagship WNBC. The whole world is listening to this show, which they weren't yet. But more people are going to hear you in 2 minutes than are going to hear you for the next 5 years at the comic strip.
But Jackie, don't you realize that is the key to success is you kind of like
seeing that.
And yes, is seeing that and kind of investing some sort of intellectual capital rather than saying right away, okay, every moment has to be a transaction. Like you invested time and energy into the situation and then eventually the world rewards you back.
But I had no idea. It wasn't like in my mind, hey, maybe someday this will go to mornings and someday I'll be right around. There was nothing. I was going there.
But you were enjoying it and you were having fun.
I was loving it. I was reaping the rewards because I would say I'm working tonight at Rascals and I'd go down and work Rascals and they'd pay me good for the promotion. And it was helping my governor's shows. And it was so worth it. For free, it was so worth it.
And what did you recognize in Howard that was different from other people? Like Howard obviously is, at his peak was called the king of all media, and he's still maybe the best guy in radio. Oh, I didn't know you had coined that.
But there was nothing about Howard because I didn't know anything to compare. When I walked in there, I knew how great they were at what they were doing. Now, I don't know whether I knew how great they were because I had walked into Rockefeller Center and they were there, or it was the big time, and it felt like the big time, and they felt that good. But I also felt like I belonged. Like when I was with Rodney Dangerfield or hanging at the Friars Club with Buddy Hackett or something, I never felt like it was like I had snuck in. I always felt like it sounds pompous, but it's not pompous. It's like it's your people. I could sit there and be funny with anybody.
So there was some inner compass, though, inside of them that said, okay, this is a good thing for me somehow, which I can't explain,
and
hanging out with this person.
It isn't just, I don't know from other shows, but this is not just another show. This is something, know.
So like what I'm trying to figure out kind of beginning, middle, and end. What made Howard Howard? Like, why was he then moved to morning and then syndicated?
You could almost look at him and see his mind saying, I shouldn't say that, so I'm going to say that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not that analytical, but he just, he was ballsy, man, because it's so hard to remember back, but saying penis on the radio was so groundbreaking and crazy. And now, like, just saying you're a dick, that didn't happen. When Sean Penn said that in the movie and said, you're a dick, and then we constantly playing that card, you're a dick. That was, it was so groundbreaking. It's so hard to look back and realize, it's like Mae West was so filthy. And if you look back at 1948, what she did, your grandmother gets up to excuse herself to go to the bathroom and says filthiest stuff. You know what I mean? It's just times change. But it was exciting, and you could feel it was groundbreaking. You just really could,
And he's also, obviously he's very funny, but I'm actually sort of a more post 2000 Howard Stern listener because I in order to learn podcasting, I wanted to study how Howard Stern interviewed people, and he interviews people in this very fascinating way. He'll ask you like an extremely direct question. You might say no, or you might kind of not answer it, but then he starts poking and prodding from every side, and he's joking around, he's making you laugh, and then eventually you're just
before you know it, you answered it.
You're in the bathtub and you're answering his questions, and everybody's laughing, and you don't even realize what you're doing. Is what I see in his guests. So there was some skill there in interviewing.
Oh, Milton Berle was on the show, and I'll never forget. After about the segment. He said, all right, we're going to commercial. And I always would leave to go to the bathroom. And Milton Berle walked out with whoever was handling him. And they walk in front of me. Milton Berle's shaking his head, and he said to his handler, and this we're on K-Rock, we're on terrestrial radio, and he said, he talked about my dick for 45 minutes, and on terrestrial radio, and got away with it. I mean, he had Robert Klein fighting with his wife on the telephone. You know what I mean? Like,
so sort of like whatever came to his mind, he would be fearless. He would stay within the gray area of the boundary. But then if he didn't get what he wanted, he somehow always was able to circle back and get people. He had likability too. So he was able to kind of get the guests to like him, even if he was asking these harsh questions.
It was,
How would he do that? Like, what define his likability?
It was a very popular show, so people knew it was worthwhile going 15 rounds with the champ. And I think it became like a badge of honor to come on there. But people warmed to him. They just do. They just would.
Why? Like, what would he do? Because he's asking these deeply personal questions that might even be offensive. Well, how would he back off?
I just know when I was there, we would laugh, and it wasn't a Tom Snyder situation. It was a good time situation, and even when it was a little serious, we were still having fun.
So you created a party atmosphere, so the guest wants to join the party. They want to join your party.
But I can't say that because I'm long gone. And I don't know how I don't know whether it's a vacuum there or whether they're still laughing and going crazy.
Then, no.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a party atmosphere, It was fun for whoever came on. It was fun.
So you're doing it 3 years, no pay. I don't know. It wasn't mentioned in the book. It seems like you didn't even think to mention pay until like 1986. And then what happens?
Well, what happened was, he called me on the road and said, we're going to mornings starting next week. I need a price for 2 days a week. So I gave him a price for 2 days a week. And he was funnier the mornings that I was there. So he fought with management to get me, whatever's going behind the door. You don't know whether it's Howard or Mel or Tom or his agent, whatever the powers that be. I went from 2 days a week to 3 to 4 to 5. Because it was glaringly different. I mean, he's a very, very funny guy. Very funny. But when he had me there, he was extra funny. And not only when I was there, I was also a conduit so Fred could write notes and pass them to me. So not only did Howard have 3 senses of humor, he had 3 distinctly different senses of humor. I'm like a punchline, slap you in the face, big joke guy, and Fred was like from Pluto, and you never knew where he was coming from, and Howard had a big, broad sense of humor. So you had 3 senses of humor coming out of one guy, and it was magnificent.
And it wasn't like you felt like, oh, this is funny. I need to say it to prove to everybody I'm funny. You naturally fit into this thing where, okay, let Howard, the star of the show, say the funny thing.
I never had a problem. Like when I left the show, it was just about money. It wasn't like I want to be a bigger star or I want somebody to hang my name on the car. It was like I'm passing him notes and he's if you write a movie or if you write for a movie, if you're lucky, in 2 years it's going to get made and eventually come out. And maybe the people go in the theater, maybe they'll laugh at your movie. If you're a comedian, you might come up with a joke for that night for your act and you write it and go up and try it that night. I'm writing stuff. And 10 seconds later, 12 million people are driving off the road laughing. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. It just doesn't, and I knew that, like people say, yeah, I was driving along and you said, whatever line, and you look around, all the people on the expressway, their heads are bobbing because they're laughing. And that's, I never had any problem that it wasn't me saying it. It was exciting as hell. It just was.
And so you start getting up to 5 days a week, or you got to 5 days a week, and your head writer, was that a title they gave you, or?
No, what happened was I was writing jokes for all those years, and we went to Channel 9, and we got a job to do a TV show at Channel 9.
So basically they were filming the show being done.
No. This is a Channel 9 television show. We're going to Secaucus. And we're writing scripts and gigs, and he's going to interview people. I mean, this is totally separate. This is not the E! Show, and it's not this is the Channel 9 show, the legendary Channel 9 show. And they came to me and said, "Hey, this is not a guild show. I don't know enough about the union. This is not a Writers Guild show. So we can't say you're writers. We're going to say you're producers or segment producers. And I said, I'm not a segment producer. I'm a writer. Because I was doing the same thing, on the fly. I said, and I know it sounds ballsy. I said, I'm not just a writer, I'm the head writer. Because I'm the last one that decides what's going in front of Howard before he reads it. And they said, well, Fred's been here longer than you, but, I said, well, Fred isn't the last one to hand Howard the line. I'm the one making those calls. And they said, well, Fred can't because he's too busy doing the sound. I said, well, I don't want to be called the sound guy. That's Fred. I'm not looking to do his job. I do my job, and I'm the head writer. And I stuck to it, and I went to the wall. And for years, they broke my balls about it. Like, oh, I'm the head writer. But I was. I'm the last guy to decide what's going in front of him. That's the head writer. So they broke my chops about it, but it really was what I was, So, everything comes, no matter what I fought for or wanted, I always got my balls broke about it, but it didn't matter because I'd go to the wall. Because I wasn't wrong. If there was an error in my judgment or error in my logic, I'm a smart guy. I'd say, all right, I understand.
How would you decide what to give to him and what to say for yourself during the show?
No, never say anything for myself. You mean for my act? Or
Yeah.
for no. There was like a few lines along the way that he didn't use. I said, you know what? I bet I could use that and saved it for myself. In fact, one of my favorite lines of all time that, said he was, I forget what but I wound up using it about my wife. I said, I have an Italian wife, and going down on her is like eating sushi off the floor of a barbershop, which is pretty horrible. And he passed on. I said, I'm going to take that home. So,
Why do you think he passed on that?
a guy, I don't know, maybe it didn't fit. I have no idea. I just know that I put an X on it in a circle and just put it to the side,
So again, it was during this time. I mean, you saw this kind of historical time in radio, which is that this guy went from small show to being the biggest thing in all of radio.
It was so gradual. It's like the old story of putting a frog on a frying pan and turning on the heat gradually.
It's like 18 years.
It was right. When we went to mornings, everybody said it wouldn't work because radio is supposed to be local. So how's it going to work in Philadelphia and Washington? Philadelphia especially is so, they're so proud. They're proud people.
Right.
We don't need your help. We got our own radio shows,
Right.
know. And so, of course, it worked big time in in Philadelphia and Washington. And we would get interviewed. We were starting to become hot stuff. And not just Howard and Robin, but they taught, and I'd get interviewed. And this was so distinct. Like after we went to Philadelphia and Washington, an interviewer would say, hey, Jackie, the show's great. Everybody loves the show. But how long can it last? Like, I don't know. We're just doing what we can. And like 2 years later, 3 years later, wow, you guys are great. Now you're on in 12 cities. But how long can it last? I swear there must have been 5 or 7 times. Like all of a sudden, we're on Channel 9. And we got our own TV show in addition to the radio show. Wow, this is unbelievable. Yeah, but how long can it last? And then he writes a few books. And how long can it last? And then he makes a movie. And, but you guys are great. How long can it last? And it's still going.
And so I know for you during this time, it was very gradual and it was it was fun every day. It was a party every day and people enjoyed it. But just being a little bit analytical, what do you think it was? He beat out essentially 20,000 other radio shows during this time.
It was just eye-opening. The show was great.
What made him different?
The show was so funny and so cutting edge. Most radio shows were so bad, and the jockeys, they just aren't funny guys, and they never were. It was so funny because when comedy started and we started traveling around in 1979 or 80, I guess in the early 80s, when the comedy clubs started popping up everywhere around the country, and they used to bring 3 guys from New York, a 3-man show or a 2-man show, or 3-man show, 2-man show. And then all of a sudden people realized, hey, we can get the local radio show, we'll get the disc jockey to promote the club, and we'll let him come in and host the show. So meanwhile, these disc jockeys, are we on terrestrial or is it all right to say naughty words here?
Yeah.
So you get a disc jockey. Every disc jockey in the world is the same. every person they come in contact with is someone they can help. I'm a car dealer. I meet you. I'm so nice to you, and you're the funniest guy in the world because you're going to say Jackie's cars are the best. You know what I mean? So everybody's kissing ass, and you're the funniest guy in the world. And meanwhile, they're hemmed in also by the radio station. So they say, do you want to come host the comedy shows? These guys, these DJs, not only think they're hysterical, but they can't wait to get on stage and say, fuck. And all of a sudden they get to the club and they'll get up on stage and say, hey, how the fuck are you? And if you're not funny, you find out really quick. And I would just watch these people because I'd be a lot of times I'd be with the first guy at the club, and the rude awakening, and they became the greatest comedy fans because they'd say, "Whoa, it is not easy. You can't just go up there and say fuck you." And they just weren't funny guys, but they thought they were funny. Meanwhile, Howard was a disc jockey that really was funny.
So just define. I know this is like the most naive question, but define how he was funnier than the rest. So what made him funny?
He would just talk about stuff and be outrageous and talk about stuff that other people didn't talk about. And he pushed the envelope as far as, farts and poop and penis. And I was making him funny. People said that heard him in Washington and heard him in New York said when he's in Washington, he was outrageous and funny. And when he got to New York, he was funny and outrageous. Which is very subtle, but he led with the funny, and there were punchlines, and I can't really put my finger on it, but it was outrage, but it was also funny, and he had opinions. It not like other disc jockeys. Other disc jockeys, here's the time, here's the weather, and here's the song. They just didn't care to do that. Now everybody does it, so it's hard to think. It's hard to remember back. Howard has always said, when he was a kid riding along with his father, he'd hear these idiots on the radio. He said, why don't they talk like a normal person? Why don't they say anything? Hey, how you doing? Here's a song. Yeah. Hey, what time is it? Ooh, He said, why don't they talk like, when I grew up, I'm going to talk like a normal human being and be the biggest radio star. And he did, and he is.
So he had this idea to talk like a normal person, which was different. Say your opinions, which most people don't do. And then
stand by him, take outrageous stances.
So, what's an example of an outrageous stance?
The whole world loved Johnny Carson. He hated Johnny Carson. He didn't hate Johnny Carson, just made people crazy,
And then
he told people he had a tiny, tiny dick because he knew that would make people comfortable.
Right, so that's part of the self-deprecating equals likability.
Very, calculated and funny as hell,
Yeah, so and then lead with the funny as opposed to lead with the outrage. What do you mean by that?
It's a subtle thing, but you could be outrageous and crazy and insulting, but if you prick the balloon and make it funny, like with bullies in the schoolyard, if you're funny, you get away with a lot more than, if it was easily defined, he wouldn't be that big because he could have been duplicated.
I guess that's sort of the difference, though.
It's elusive. I don't mean to be evasive at all. If I had an answer, I would give it to you.
No, it's sort of like we're figuring it out in real time here. It makes me think of like Jon Stewart versus a Bill O'Reilly. So Bill O'Reilly might have outrageous opinions. Jon Stewart led with the funny, but then was able to get his outrageous opinions out there. So, and then he was the funnier show and actually then became the more relevant show.
And, that's a hard thing to discuss because I agree with Jon Stewart. And Bill O'Reilly's a piece of dirt. So it's hard to compare. But, there's not a funny bone in Bill O'Reilly.
Right. But Jon Stewart was funny. So, so at the very least, you could tune in for that.
Right.
So,
and he was incisive and wonderful at the same time. And it was, it was huge.
So fast forward, it's 2001. You're up for negotiations. You had a set number in mind. Why didn't they just give it to you? You've been with the show for 18 years.
Hey, you got a phone? He has to make a call. That's a very good question.
Yeah.
That's the unanswered question.
I never understand.
It was, I tell people, if you're a comic and somebody says you want to work in Alaska, you don't say no. You say $60,000. And they don't give it to you, of course, and you don't get the gig. If they say yes, well, fuck, I'll go to Alaska.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't price myself out of the ball game by any means. I thought it was a fair figure, and I was really in a bad way. And I said, not to be a hypocrite, but if I can get the 60 grand, I'll go to Alaska. If I can get what I'm asking for or close to it, I'll stay. And I'm so full of crap because after a couple months, I said, I'll take the old offer if it's still there, because, it was such a surreal thing to sit there and laugh for 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you didn't realize you don't miss the fame or the money. You miss the camaraderie. And we weren't, it was not like we were walking down the street arm in arm. We were battling with each other. But it was an amazing, amazing time. And it's not an easily recreatable thing. And we had amazing chemistry. But I didn't ask for that crazy an amount. I thought, I had been there for a long time and I had a lot to do. Now he certainly doesn't need me, and probably didn't need me the day I left. But I had a lot to do with helping him get to where he was. And I was like,
and it wasn't a big ask. I mean, they were even saying in your final year of that 5-year contract negotiation, you'd be getting kind of in the range of what you were asking for.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was a crazy time. I tried to stand by my guns, and then I wavered, and that's just how it wound up. Now, I don't think money had anything to do with it. I think, I don't know whether me leaving was a good idea for them. I will never know. The only person who knows the answer to why I'm not still there is Howard. He's the only one that knows, and nobody knows. Whether it had to do with his new girlfriend, whether it had to do with he had enough of, depending on me, or whether he thought he didn't need me. Who knows? Who knows?
And so 2 weeks pass, 3 weeks pass, a month passes. What were you feeling at that point? You're I don't know if you were listening or not, or you're just hanging out.
No, I never listened, but I had no idea if they were going to call or not. I really had no idea. What had happened was they had stopped negotiating, and that's when we went in and had the meeting, and I said, all right, Jackie's not going to come in Monday, which is how we always did it. And then they always feigned like I had stood him up, that was pretty hurtful. They'd tell 12 million people, oh, Jackie stood us up. There's still people pissed off at me. How could you leave Howard and Robert high and dry? I never did that. I would never do that. I'm a professional guy. I'm a nice guy. I wouldn't just not show up for work. That's, But then after a couple months, my lawyer called and said, listen, Jackie will take the deal. It's still on the table. And I called Howard and said, listen, Larry called Tom to tell him if the deal's still on the table, we'll take it. And Howard said, oh, that's good to know. Thanks. We'll let you know.
Nothing.
They didn't call back and say, no, you didn't get the gig, or you're not getting the gig. Or
I don't know if this would have been appropriate, but let me just ask you, if you, before the negotiations were over that first time around, if you had called Howard and said, hey, Howard, just give me advice how I should do this, would that have been appropriate, or how would you have asked him?
No, because he had always said that he never wanted to be a part of the negotiation. But that's ridiculous because he's the entire negotiation.
Right, he's the show.
He's the show, and he's, it's his baby. What he wants, he gets. If he wanted a golden chair to sit in, he'd get a golden chair. No, Howard, we're not going to pay your writer that much money. You can't have him. That's, it's like, the story of Frank Sinatra saving Shecky Green's life.
No.
He said, all right, boys, stop beating him up. You know what I mean? Like he was in total control. He could have waved his finger, especially after I said I think the deal was on the table already.
Okay, so let's just say even a year later, when did you realize, this great experience I had for 18 years?
No, I knew it was done. Like after I told him that I would take the deal if it's still on the table, when they didn't call back after a day or two, I knew that ship had sailed. And and it was like a couple months before I made that call. So I think in my heart, I probably knew I had let the ship sail too far anyway, I
mean, did you get depressed?
No, I was totally shored up. If you're not ready to hear, if you're not ready to walk away, you can't negotiate.
Right.
And I was in the weirdest situation. I knew I couldn't quit drinking. I knew I couldn't get divorced, and I knew I couldn't take a nap. And I was just there was no way to break out of this thing I was in, which sounds so childish, but it was very real at the time. You know,
Why did you think you couldn't do those things?
You know, I didn't want to. Divorcing my wife would have been so impossible because there was no time. You know, working the show and then working gigs, and I certainly wasn't going to move out into a bachelor pad with a hot plate, be a multimillionaire, you know, cooking eggs on a hot plate, and I didn't want a divorce raked over in front of 12 million people, and and I knew there was no way I was going to work my ass off that much and then not have a drink. You know, I couldn't do that math in my head. As silly as it sounds now, I tell everybody the same thing. I'm 69, okay? When I wake up in the morning, all I can think, when can I take a nap? When can I climb back in bed and lie down? All I want to do is take a nap. And if I was able to take a nap in 2001, I'd still be on the show. But I couldn't make myself do it. And I know, as childish as that sounds, you know the old definition of an idiot is somebody that does the same thing 99 times and says, it's going to be different this time. I knew I wasn't ever going to take a nap. But now I'm 69. If you told me, Jackie, we're going to give you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but you have to take a nap every day, I'd suck your dick. I'd be like, well, are you kidding? But that was then, and this is now, you know.
So do you think you part of what you wanted to ask for was because if you had this extra money, then you could afford the divorce? You could get
No, it wasn't affording the divorce. I wanted the money because you couldn't just walk away from that show, and I can't tell you, the rationale in my head was like, yeah, you know, if I get what I'm asking for, maybe I'll feel better about myself. You know, I really have never been able to go deep enough to answer that. It just wasn't the kind of show you walked away from. You're like, all right, if I can average $1 million for the next 5 years, I'm going to stay here and then somehow make this work. And it was as easy as coming home and taking a nap. And I'm not even making that up. But I'm a stubborn piece of shit, okay? And I was not going to, as great as that show is, and as much as I love being part of it, I refuse to let that be my life. Like, go to the show, come home, and go to bed at 8 o'clock at night, or go home. When I came home, I didn't want to take a nap. You know, I want to live my life. I didn't do anything. You know what I mean? We watched Law and Order. Instead of going to sleep, we'd watch Law and Order, watch LA Law. Like, it's idiocy. But that was the idiocy I was caught up in. And that's the truth.
And so once you were out of it, was there any point in the years later you've had, oh, this is good now, this is relief?
Well, you know, the same as the 70s. Yeah. I'm miserable half the time and elated half the time. And I'm not making that up. That's a true story. I realize.
What's your average day like now, pre-book, pre-working on this book?
Well, it's so eclectic. I don't know. I get up, I go out and work on the computer and maybe, you know, put some gigs on or make some calls or do some interviews or visit with some friends or go to lunch or go, you know, there is no typical day. Like in the summer, every day I get up and swim.
You did the Sirius show for a while?
I did the Sirius show for 8 years, 1 day a week, an hour a week. And now it was great fun. I still love that. But they just yanked the plug on that, never any explanation. You know, it's a weird regime. The Howard Stern Show is a weird regime. It is and always has been. And, you know, as far as the drinking, I knew I had to quit in the back of my mind. But when I left the show, it wasn't, if I leave the show and I don't get my contract, then I can quit drinking. That wasn't part of the plan necessarily. I knew in the back of my head for a long time, Jack, at some point you got to stop, at some point. And all of a sudden I'm off the show. And all of a sudden, is it 5 o'clock yet? I said, I realized I cannot spend my life waiting for it to be 5 o'clock every night. So the only solution is to have it never be 5 o'clock. And I just walked away, and no AA or anything. And people say, oh, you didn't have a problem. And I'm like, okay. You know, I'm not bragging about, you know, I just knew it was time to stop. And I just stopped drinking. And I don't know if I recommend it or don't recommend it, but more and more people, it's just like people, it used to be everybody smoking and now nobody's smoking. Like it used to be like, oh God, I'm at the party and I don't drink. And you know, meanwhile, he doesn't drink, she doesn't drink. so many old rock and rollers and you just stop, a little self-preservation or whatever. Alcohol, it's all so funny. I got a friend whose mother has been an alcohol counselor. She's 85 and 60 years of alcohol counseling. And I got to be friends with her and her husband. So I actually would go, you ever have a friend where you visit their parents without them, because you like them? And
no, actually.
Well, so I go down to visit Liz and Herman. He's 95, she's 85, and they're just brilliant and so wonderful. And guy's a multi-billionaire, and I walk in, he's got a little piece of paper with pencil scribblings, the jokes that he wants to try on me. You know what I mean? One of those things. And because jokes go right across the thing, just like with McCartney, it's just like a Jets fan or a hockey fan. It just goes, it cuts through, right? So she's an alcohol counselor for 6 years, and she goes, I never talked to you about your drinking. And she said, how bad was your problem? And I said, people argue with me because I just walked away without AA or anything like that. People are like, oh, you didn't have a problem. And I said to her, it's funny because how do you judge? I said, I never got up in the morning ever and needed a drink, needed a shot. And I never sat with my wife and watched television at night and had a few beers or had a drink. And, I never sat and drank beer and watched the ball game. And I look and she's smiling. I said, what's so funny? She said, anybody that uses the word never when they're describing their drinking is an alcoholic.
That's funny.
And I had 60 years of experience. I wasn't going to argue with her.
I guess because there's no reason and you're drinking.
There's it's just very interesting. But so I don't know what the story was, but it was very smart to walk away. But I tell people the same thing. I didn't win a battle, because I just stopped. I make the same analogy all the time is I like tuna fish, okay? I love a tuna fish sandwich. I mean, I could eat 1,000 tuna fish sandwiches. If I had one for lunch today, I'll love it. It'll be so great. And I might have one tomorrow. But I might not have another tuna fish sandwich for a month. But when I have it a month from now, I'll love it. But there's no investment in it. To me, the person who wins is the person who have a glass of wine with dinner and not have to have a glass of wine with dinner tomorrow night or not go,
Right.
Somebody who can go out and get drunk as hell tonight and then maybe not get drunk for a month, like take it or leave it. And I would love to think that now I could just have a glass of wine with dinner, but I don't want to risk it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it sounds childish, like taking away somebody's toy, but whatever it takes,
Well, I wanna just quickly, since the book is called Bow to Stern, I want to just ask, I want to ask advice. So I'm doing this podcast 3 years. What should someone like me, what can I learn from Howard Stern that you've learned, that you studied from him, that you've seen him do? What can I do better? You haven't obviously seen all my podcasts or anything, but what would you suggest to anybody?
Just don't feel any barriers. If there's something you want to say or do, just do it. Don't ask. They say when you're a kid, you'd be there all day asking for permission. You just do something and then roll with the punishment. You know what I mean? Just do whatever you think. Follow your heart.
But you see so many comedians now, and I'm not even talking about all these recent cases of harassment because that's obviously bad stuff, different category. Right. But you see all these comedians say stuff, and everybody says, no, you can't say that. Even though comedy should be the one place you could say anything. That's the safe place.
I'm the wrong guy to talk to about that. As far as that, I'm talking about places where you should go, in your heart and your mind. I'm not talking about politically correct stuff. I've been telling the same stupid jokes and, a black joke here and a Jewish joke there and a Catholic joke there and a Polish joke. And in fact, I've always done the same garbage. And anybody that sees me on stage, if they don't know that I am as harmless and non-hateful as anybody could ever be, there'll always be somebody that says that's not funny. But there's always going to be somebody that says that's not funny about the most gentle joke in the world because that's just how it is. It's like I can say, oh, fuck you. Or I can say, fuck you. It's not the same thing.
Right.
It's just words. It's all attitude and feeling.
I think what you said about Howard saying, don't edit. I think he didn't edit himself in a good way. Like he would basically, this is on my mind, he had faith in his intelligence and his ability to understand the situation, so he wouldn't edit himself.
Right, and he knew enough to run up to the line, but not stomp over it and wind up thrown off the air, just enough to it cause a little buzz.
How do you think you learned that?
I think it's gut. I think with him it was innate. I think he just knew.
So wait, I know you have your joke line. It's 516-922-9463, right? Okay, you mind if I call it right now?
I hope it works.
Okay, let's see how it works too. Hold on, let's see.
Rick Dees used to give that out to his listeners and tell them it was Tom Selleck's home phone number.
So 516-922-9463. Let's see. I'm gonna see what joke you got there. Do you update it every day? How often do you update it?
No, just when I have a new gig. In a week, 2 weeks.
All right, it's ringing. Oh wait, it's the Paul McCartney joke.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. All right, it's the Paul McCartney joke. Good. That's a good one. Funny one. So I'm doing stand up tonight. I think I'm gonna try to use this joke.
Now I didn't.
How do I convert that into?
I wasn't being rude. I didn't Google you because I wanted to come in here clean.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
So you said you're part of, or I don't know.
Yeah. I own part of Stand Up New York. It's on 78th and Broadway, and I do stand up there 3 to 6 times a week.
Now, is that the place with the right next door to the recording studio upstairs?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, those guys. I went in and talked to those guys. I was talking to them about maybe doing a podcast from up there.
Oh, yeah. Come on down. Or,
is that still there?
Yeah. And when do you want to do stand up there, or you want to tell your jokes?
They just opened a club right near you guys, right?
Yeah, but that club's. I mean, I don't want to put any club down. There's 2 clubs on the Upper West Side now.
Yeah, right.
It's good to have a scene anyway.
Right.
It's good. I think it's good for the Upper West Side scene to have 2 clubs, so then comedians can come up there instead of always downtown, and they have a place to go.
Right. And they've got 2 different places to go. Have you always done stand-up? I don't know anything about you.
I haven't always done it.
I should turn around and interview you.
I haven't always done it.
Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey and then New York.
Did you come up as a musician or as a...
No, I've been a writer for a long time, and then I also did some investing because I needed to make some money. Writing wasn't doing it.
And when did you get horny to do comedy?
I would say about 2 years ago, and then about a year ago.
What fueled that? You told a joke you were with some friends.
Okay, I'll tell you really what fueled it. I've never said it to anybody. I was at a party and I was talking to a girl that I liked, and
You know Henny Youngman's definition of a comedian?
No.
That's a guy who had a relative tell him that they were funny at a family reunion. That's what you're going to say.
No, it's not quite what I'm going to say. But I was talking to a girl that I liked, and she was drinking a glass of wine, and I told her a joke, and she suddenly burst out laughing while she was mid-gulping down her wine.
Spit it out.
She spit it out all over my face. And I really did tell myself, I want to do this professionally.
There's nothing like a spit take to fuel your...
Right.
Now, are you a married guy?
No, I'm divorced.
So you're flirting with a girl.
Yeah.
Or you're talking to a girl.
Talking to a girl.
Whatever you want to call it.
And I told a joke, and then and she apologized.
A joke, or you just said something?
I just said something funny.
Said something funny.
Yeah, I didn't really tell.
And she
jokes.
laughed, and it felt good.
Yeah, right. She laughed,
it felt different than anything else.
And it was so visceral. She spit all over me, and she felt bad. She wouldn't talk to me again. She apologized so much, and then she just went to the other side of the room. She was embarrassed.
Are you still in contact with that person?
No. I could barely even remember what she looks like. But except for the fact that she spit all over me. But I said I want to do stand-up comedy. I want people spitting all the time. And
do you tell that story on stage?
No, I never told it. Should I tell it?
Open with that.
Yeah. All right.
People say why am I up here? I'll tell you exactly why.
And so let me ask you this. If you were to turn that Paul McCartney joke into a stand-up style joke, how would you do it? Because I like that joke, but it's not quite stand-up style, right?
Now, it's too beautiful.
It's got a classic joke structure.
You just tell it in the first person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because I have some work stuff.
I have to be, I'm a comedian. I'm trying to be a comedian. I'm not, I think I have to do this. Like, I'm not good at job interviews. I went for an interview today, and the guy said to me, there you are. You're into the joke.
Yeah. Good.
Do it in the first person. And then if it bombs, you could say, fucking Jackie Martling put me on the wrong, and then I'll get a laugh too.
Right. That's good. All right. Well, Jackie the Joke Man Martling, Bow to Stern is your book.
Let me tell people
highly
how to
recommended.
If you go to JackieTheJokeman.com, Jackie the Joke Man is one word. JackieTheJokeman.com. That brings you right to the Amazon page for the hardcover or the Kindle. And the forward is by Artie Lang, but he also does a forward on the Audible audiobook. And the audiobook, all this stuff is right there, and it's selling well. And I appreciate this interview. And you're a delightful guy.
Thank you so much. You know, I just want to say thank you to everyone listening to this. I would say doing a podcast is the activity that I've enjoyed most in these past few years. Please take a moment to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever it is you get your podcasts. It will only take a second, but it will help other people discover the podcast, and it will really show people in general that this is a quality show and that it's worth listening to. You can also check out the show notes at jamesaltucher.com/podcast. And also, if you want to get my blog updates and other updates that I do, sign up for the newsletter at jamesaltucher.com. Thanks again. I really appreciate you guys.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.